Today I'm going to demonstrate how to clean your Auto Breeze gold medal cotton candy machine. First two steps that we have to make sure we do before we do anything is to make sure that we use the lockout tagout procedure for our gold medal cotton candy machine. And that is to actually lock out the cord with one of our lockouts that we have purchased for doing this on any of maintenance on any of our equipment. Secondly, after we've gotten that done, before transporting it or moving it anywhere, if you need to make sure that you use the lock positions on each side of the cotton candy machine. You want to make sure you undo these, they're here and here, before you actually put it back into use. So to lock those, you just twist them into place. And now the machine is locked in, the head is locked solid, so it's easier to work on. Now, to do some of this, we're going to need a Phillips screwdriver, a 7/16 wrench, and possibly a 1/4 inch socket. We'll get to that part inside in there in a minute. So on the top of the head, you'll notice that you've got the floaters on each side. You want to make sure you don't get these wet. They do become a little bit crusty, and we replace them when they get to the point where they don't flex anymore. To take this apart, there are 4 Phillips screws on the top of the floss head here. On the cap, so you have here, here, and here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those off. You'll notice though that sometimes the sugar starts to build up into these screws and will make it difficult for you to take them off. If that's the case, you can get a damp towel with some warm water, and you will actually put a little bit of put that towel on the top of the screw, and that will remove the sugar enough for you to be able to get your Phillips screwdriver into the screws. Like this one here is pretty crusty, but I'm able to push through the sugar. So we'll actually remove these screws. One more to go. There we are. So now we can actually take the screws out and then remove the top head, the top of the head, I should say. That comes off just like that. Now the machine is going, this one, they didn't actually burn it out properly. After the time, every time you use it, you want to make sure that we clean out the sugar. That means use it all the way up. Use it till it runs out, stops producing cotton candy. If you'll notice, I'm going to tip this forward so that you can actually see that this thing is very, very full of sugar. If that happens, we have to vacuum that out. So I'm going to pause the video, come back, I'll vacuum that out with a shop vac, and then we'll start again. So I have tipped the machine sideways so that you guys can see down inside of the top of the head, so I can show you where we're going to continue to remove. I've removed most of the sugar from the inside. It's still going to see a little bit spilling out. Like I said, that's just because it was left undone. What we want to make sure we do, like I said, is we burn off that excess sugar so that we don't have this buildup here that's starting to build up around the floss coils. What that'll do is that'll actually help or make it more difficult for the sugar to come out and make a good solid cotton candy. So now let's go ahead and take off this. There's a nut here. The first one is usually a plastic acorn nut, and it comes off with your fingers. And there is a metal nut underneath that. Again, using the 7/16 wrench, you're going to remove those. And then you'll remove the cover plate here. This protects the ends of the connection here for the coils. Now this is where I was saying you're going to need a 1/4 inch socket or ratchet set so that you can undo the 2 posts that hold down the wire connection. So once we get those out, we should be able to pop the floss head itself out, the heating element. This is a little difficult because it is sideways. Normally it'd be sitting straight up and down, so it'd be a lot easier for you guys. So, as you can see, this floss head is very choked. It's very well used, but it does need to be cleaned out so that we can get proper cotton candy coming back out of this machine. So From here, I'm going to pause the video again, and I will restart, and you guys can see where we're going to clean some of these elements out of the machine. Alright, so we've cleared off the machine so it's out of the way so that we can clean the heating element and the crown cap. So first thing, like I said before, we don't want the leather floaters to get wet. So we're going to take those out and off of the crown. Move those aside. This is very simple. You just take this and you actually dip it in hot water. You're going to run it down in there so that we get all of the sugar off. Sorry, my throat. But it's very quick, it's very easy, especially when you use very warm water. Once that is cleared out, you just shake it loose, let it dry. You'll let this stuff sit and dry for 24 hours, but you just make sure too that there's no cracks in this head and that it's in good condition, that the threads are all there, and we want to make sure we're looking at all of that. Once that's done, you set it aside on a towel, usually really good. Take the heating element, we're going to grab it by the two wires to keep those as much out of the water as possible. And what we'll do is we'll actually dip this down into the hot water. You may need to use a soft bristle brush to clean some of that off because since if it's been sitting as long as this one has, it's going to take a while. Now that hot water will melt that sugar right off of there and it will come out. So once it's all cleared off, I mean you can already see it's a lot better, but there's still a lot of sugar stuck around the outer edges here, so we got to continue until we do that. We want to keep the leads out of the wire so that we don't, or out of the water, so that we don't let water get down in there and risk of corrosion inside of the element. This is probably one of the most expensive pieces to replace on your cotton candy machine, so you want to be careful with it. Want to make sure we don't drop it because there is a porcelain coating over the top of these bands, and that's to help keep it from obviously shorting out on the metal band itself. So I'm going to probably, I'll pause the video here. I'll come back once this is all clean, but you can already see it's starting to come out pretty good. So that sugar is definitely melting off of there. Alright, so I've got the machine back in place. I have wiped it down with a dry towel to knock off any loose sugar or anything laying around. Any really stubborn pieces of sugar that I found crusted around this outer edge. I use a little bit of warm water on a towel, kind of set it on there, and then just let it melt the sugar away and then wiped it clean. We don't want to use any harsh chemicals or anything on top of this because it can damage the unit itself. Another thing too that I forgot to stress earlier on is just make sure that we don't press down heavily on this. Inside this there are two brushes on each side that run on a copper band, and if you actually press on this you can misalign these and cause the machine to no longer work properly. It won't put the heat out to the heating element. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and put it back together now. So one of the things that we want to make sure we stress on the band itself, somewhere around there it should say top, and so that just indicates which side is the top and which side is the bottom. Something else to make sure that we do is that these leads go on opposite sides of this. You don't want to put the leads on one side because it won't heat the element anymore after that. So now that we've located the top and we've located where the leads go, we go ahead and kind of bend around in there in place, and you just set it down on the top, and we'll go ahead and put those posts back in. Those were the quarter-inch caps, so that way you make sure you put those back in there to hold down your leads to the brass plates. So go ahead and get these back in there. And it takes a little bit to work them down in there sometimes because you do have to bend the wires back into place. So once they're in, we'll tighten those up with your 1/4" drive. Just want to make them snug. They don't have to be to the point where they're going to strip out that brass. Next is the protective plate. And this, if you'll notice on there, has a couple holes drilled, or partially through on one side and none on the other. Those go down and they set, again I'll turn this a little bit, they set right here on these two screw posts. So once you've got that down in there, go ahead and grab your 7/16 metal nut first. And we run that back down on that post in the center. These, again, not too crazy tight. It's just snug so that it will not come loose. And then the acorn nut, that's more so the top of this has an Allen head on it for adjusting the brushes. So you put that acorn nut back on there and snug it down, because that keeps the sugar out of that, so that you don't have to fight getting that off of there. So you take the cap, and on there, you just line up the 4 holes with the 4 holes inside there. It doesn't matter, you can turn it either direction. Any direction actually will work. But once you've got it aligned, you just run your 4 Phillips screws back in there. I did run those under some warm water on the top just to finish clearing off that excess sugar. And there. Right. We take our Phillips screwdriver, snug those down. And we're not He-Man here. We don't need to crank these down so hard that we crack anything, but we do want to make sure that they're definitely tight. Give a good 1/4" turn after you hit the bottom, probably to make sure that they're tightened down. Or 1/4 turn, not 1/4 inch. Alright. So there's, oh, I forgot to leave these. You see how it was moving around on me? That's because I actually took it in a lock position when I was trying to clean around the outer edge with the rag. So now that it's all nice and tight on there, we have the leather floats left to put on. And those, like I said, don't get them wet. Once they become wet, they just become stiff and they don't really do their job anymore. So it's best to just leave them alone, kind of knock off any extra sugar that's on them. Put those down in there. Same thing here. Just flex the sugar off. I guess once they get wet, they collect the sugar onto them because they don't seem to, they always never get used, or they're wet slightly still when they're put back on, and it just makes them crusty, and then they don't do what they're supposed to do. Again, like another 1/4" turn to snug them down, and that, my friends, is how we clean and take apart our cotton candy machine. Next, I would just go into making cotton candy.